Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine and I have a recipe to share with you today. We are in the middle of our Silk Road main lesson block for our homeschool and we're using this book called the Silk Road Gourmet by Laura Kelley as inspiration for our recipes. We love to add some cooking inspiration when we're doing our history units, and today we're going to be making orange chicken Koresh, and this is an Iranian dish. Now I have doubled the recipe and I have changed a couple of the ingredients. Now the recipe calls for chicken breast and I'm using chicken thigh and a whole chicken. And so I have altered the recipe just a little bit, but you can find the original recipe as well as my alterations on the blog post that accompanies this video, and that link is down in the description box below. So I'm going to begin by searing the chicken. I have 5 chicken thighs that I've cut up into really large bite-sized pieces. I've added some olive oil, and we're just going to sear this a little bit. We don't want to cook it all the way. We just want to give it some nice color. Now this is only going to take about 3 to 5 minutes to cook, so keep an eye on it, and once it's nice and browned, we want to remove it from our pan. We're going to set it aside. We want to keep all of those juices in the pan because we're going to be using that for later on in the recipe. So in the meantime, I'm also going to be boiling a whole chicken, and I have some homemade broth from a recipe that I made earlier. So this already has some orange blossom water and some saffron, and then my other chicken broth is just pretty much plain. So we're going to add that to our chicken, and it's going to cook for about an hour. In the meantime, I'm going to work on the rest of the ingredients. These oranges are in pretty sad shape, but they are still juicy, and I juice about 5 to 6 of them. One of them is completely too old. And we want to get about 1.5 cups of orange juice. Now, if you're doubling the recipe, you actually want 3 cups of orange juice. And I only do 1.5 cups because my family isn't super into the sweet, savory dishes that involve citrus. And so I'm going to go a little bit lighter on that, but still you get a lot of orange flavor. I'm also using the zest of 1 orange, but that's actually a tangerine, and it does alter the flavor a little bit. And I'm also using a little bit of orange blossom water, which the recipe does not call for. So let's put those things aside and work on the spices. I have my really large mortar and pestle here, and I am going to use it in order to grind our black pepper. I did not have any ground black pepper, so we're going to use this, and then I'm just going to add the rest of the spices to this. So I'm just going to grind that as finely as I can. I pound it a little bit, and then I just bring my pestle around the mortar until it's nice and fine. I'm also going to add 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. To that, I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of cardamom, and then 1 teaspoon of nutmeg, which I'm going to estimate. So I've got my microplane here, and I have just ground up some nutmeg. Next, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of cumin and 1 teaspoon of coriander. To this, we're going to add 2 teaspoons of salt. And then I have this little packet of true lime powder. It's been in my cabinet for a little while, and I thought this was the perfect opportunity to use it. Now, the recipe does call for Persian lime powder, which I did not have. And I actually didn't have enough lime powder, so later I'm going to add some lime zest and lime juice to this, just so that we can get a little bit more of that citrus flavor. Next, we're going to make some saffron water by taking half a teaspoon of saffron and about a half cup of hot boiling water. We're going to let that sit for a while we work on our lime zest. So I'm using my zester again, and I've got all that lime zest, and I'm also going to add the juice of that lime since we are going to really want to get some of that flavor in there. Now it calls for white vinegar, which I don't have, so I'm using 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. We're going to set those things aside and work on our onions. Now the recipe calls for 2 onions. I am doubling this recipe, so I'm going to slice up 4 onions. And that little pan that I had isn't going to be quite enough room to kind of fry those onions and get them translucent. So I'm actually going to get another really big pot and do 2 of the onions in there. And then I'm going to transfer those onions together so that we get those great flavors from the chicken from earlier. I decided to transfer my chicken to my Instant Pot since it was taking a while to cook, and it only takes about 15 to 20 minutes to cook in the Instant Pot. And now it's done. It's been nicely boiled, and it's just going to fall away from the bone. And then, of course, we have that wonderful chicken broth, which I'm going to be using later on in this recipe as well as another recipe. So we're going to remove the chicken from the bone and add it to the other chicken that we had from earlier. We're going to add our orange zest to our onions, which are nicely cooked down, and then to that we can add in our chicken. Going to mix it all up and add our orange juice. We want to bring it up to just below a boil and let that reduce. It's going to be really flavorful. Next, we're going to add in all of our spices, and we want to mix that in as well. You want to allow cooking time as you add in all of these ingredients. So I've added that lime zest. Now we're adding some chicken broth. And then the last thing we're going to do is work on our carrots, which we're going to julienne about 4 to 6 carrots. I am doubling the recipe, but then I added in a couple more carrots as well. I think they taste really good along with the orange flavors, and adding a little bit more vegetables to this dish is always a good thing. So we're going to add those in, but everything is pretty much done. So you just want to soften the carrots a little bit, and I didn't overcook them at all, so they still had a nice bit of a crunch to them. In a separate saucepan, we're going to add our saffron water, our lime juice, and our vinegar. I'm adding 1 orange, even though the recipe calls for 3, and we are doubling it, so I should be adding 6, but I'm only going to add 1, and we're going to let that cook down for about 5 to 10 minutes. And then we're going to be adding it to our chicken. So I'm going to check on it now. It's looking pretty good, but before we add that mixture to our chicken, I'm going to work on one last thing, and that is to chop or slice up some almonds. Of course, you can buy them pre-sliced. We need about 3 teaspoons and then about 3 teaspoons of pistachios. Now, I did misread the recipe and I forgot to double it, so do double it if you are following the recipe that I'm sharing with you in this video. The recipe calls for fewer pistachios and almonds if you're using less chicken. So now it's time to add that to our chicken. We want to add it towards the end so you still get a bit of a crunch with those nuts. And then we're going to add that mixture that's been kind of simmering on the stove. It's going to add a lot of flavor to that chicken. It is a really flavorful dish with lots of different spices and sweetness. And if you're not too much into that sweet and savory coming together, you can definitely cut down on the orange juice as well as some of the orange toppings, and then just stick with some orange blossom water and maybe a little bit of orange zest just to get that hint of orange. So I'm going to plate this, and I think this serves really well with plain rice since this is such a flavorful dish, but I did make a savory rice dish to go along with this, and that was really amazing. So if you'd like to check out both of those recipes, they are on the blog post that accompanies this video. You can find that link down in the description box below. There's a look at that savory rice dish, which was amazing. It has onions, tomatoes, and garbanzo beans, and you can just have this as a vegan meal by itself if you don't pair it with the chicken, because there are so many garbanzo beans in that. But I decided to put these 2 dishes together, and it was a real hit in my family. You can check out some of my other cooking tutorials by tapping on this screen. That link is also in the description box below. You can find more information about how I made this recipe and all the other things that we're doing with our Silk Road main lesson block on the blog post that accompanies this video. You can find that link down in the description box below. And if you'd like to see what we're eating and how we're homeschooling on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram at Pepper and Pine.